RotoGrinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderEd, Blender HD. If you're going to follow me on Twitter. And it's Tuesday, August 22nd, and we're continuing our NFL Primer series from yesterday through next week. You'll see them all titled NFL Primer. Get you up to speed on playing NFL DFS coming into the new season. Right, we're only two and a half weeks away from the new NFL DFS season. By the time you get into like week 11, week 12 of NFL, you're like, God, when is this over? But in the beginning, it's nice. It's nice and fresh. Getting out of the doldrums of MLB, right? We'll have the September call-ups. MLB will be a train wreck going forward. They're trying to predict lineups and pitch counts and everything. But we're heading into NFL season, and the best thing to do heading into NFL season is to sign up for RotoGrinders. We got tons of NFL content coming out. We got all of our projections, our ownership, our lineup HQ, or everything here at RotoGrinders. You get me, you get our Discord. I have my own premium Discord channel. And let me tell you that, if you're a RotoGrinders premium subscriber of any package, you could just have single sport or anything. You get access to that channel. And twice a month, I do group coaching calls on Zoom. So we could talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about privately, not recorded. So I'm doing one tonight, 7:15 Eastern tonight. So if you sign up and join the Discord, you'll see the link at that time in the Blenders Game Theory channel in Discord. So sign up, click on that link in the description, get $10 off your first month. And if you're not going to do that, at least hit the thummy thumbs. Hit the thummy thumbs in the morning. All the early birds here, D-Fick, Joe Mac, Ryan Edwards, Key Lime. Key Lime, I love your pie. I love your pie. I really don't like key lime pie, actually. But I mean, obviously, people like key lime pie, right? So hit that thummy thumb. Everyone got home safe. So we got enough thummy thumbs yesterday that no planes crashed the way home from the Draftkings Live final. So just make sure that happens every day. You can prevent plane crashes by hitting the thumbs up button. Okay, so yesterday we were talking about, we started our NFL DFS primer, talked a lot about projections, right, which you could get in Lineup HQ, right? You see FPTS, they go, oh, what is that? That's the prediction. No. All it is the mean projection on a distribution. Now, for a lot of players, if it's normally distributed, the means and the medians will be fairly close to one another. But a lot of times they're not. So we talked about that yesterday. The difference between means and medians, right? What player distributions look like. We also talked a little bit about correlation, right? We talked a lot about like correlation of players in the same game, right? Regardless of position, right? The more points a team scores, the more opportunities a team has. All players on that team benefit. The less opportunities and the less points a team has, all players are related also, right? A team that only gets 17 minutes of possession and only scores 6 points on 2 field goals probably doesn't have many players, if any, that put up any score worth having, especially and not multiple of them together. So that's why a lot of times you get focused in NFL DFS on game environments. Right? What game environments? We look at the team totals. We look at the totals for the games because the NFL betting markets at the closing line are one of the most efficient in the industry in everything. Anything sports betting. So a lot of times in NFL DFS, you will be targeting game environments that have high totals. You wanted to go past that, sure. But you also have to think relatively. And one of the most important aspects of being a good DFS player, good sports bettor, good at any type of game, is thinking in relative terms. Okay, it's first off, you think in probabilistic terms, right? You said, oh, the highest team total game, that's gonna go off for 70 points. Well, what's the probability of that? That's your first step, right? We take a look at these player numbers, right? Cooper Kupp, 21.85. That's just like around the 50th percentile outcome. If he goes for 29, what's the probability of that? How often does that happen? 30% of the time? He only puts up 9 points. What does that happen? That only happens like the bottom 20% of the time. Thinking probabilistically. That's one of the things that I highlight a lot in the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. How to think like a professional DFS player. So hopefully you're already thinking probabilistically. But how do you think relatively? Okay? So this is the logical mistake that NFL DFS players, the average ones, the bad ones, subpar, make. They look at all these team totals, right? Like that, and they go, well, I'm gonna stack one of the lower what happens if the San Francisco Pittsburgh game with the 40.5 total, or the Cardinals Commanders game with the 39 total? What if that's the game that goes off? What if? Well, obviously there's a probability attached to it, like we mentioned before. Like it can't not, it's like, oh, it's 0%. It's never that. You're already past that. You already think, oh, probabilistically, maybe it has to go over 60 points. Maybe it has a 15% chance, 10% chance, 5% chance, whatever. It's not 0. There's like, well, what if I do that? No one's stacking the 49ers Steelers game. What if that's the game that goes off? Well, if the game goes off, it doesn't. That in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean anything for you in DFS. Because what happens if that game goes off for 60 points, but the highest total Dolphins-Chargers games goes off for 60 points also? And that game is higher owned or whatever. Well, what did you do? You didn't win anything. Oh, you met. Okay, you have 2% owned game that has as many points as the 20% owned game. The 20% owned game also has a lot of points. So you take a look at your lineups and you're like, oh, my lineups are doing great. And here's all these 30% owned players that also did well. Because you didn't think in relative terms. It's not just this is the game that goes off. It's this game goes off more than all other games. And what are the chances of that? You have to combine those two things together. We have, 13 games in the slate? How many games? I don't even know. 12? Something like that. What happens relatively? Think of all the different types of scenarios in your head. Out of these, let's count how many games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 13. That's what I thought. We have 13 games. Let's say, I'm just using an exaggeration. 10 of them go for 90 plus points. I'm using exaggerative examples just to make a point. If 10 of them go for 90 plus points, didn't really matter which game you stacked or team you stacked or anything. All these games are 45 to 38, 10 out of the 13 of them. Well, I played low-owned Carolina Atlanta, and that went for 90 points. It's like, yeah, but the Cincinnati Cleveland game went for 90 points also. And the Saints Titans game went for 90 points. Like, what does it matter? Oh, well, I have a 2% owned wide receiver that put up 30. It's like, yeah, there's 17 wide receivers that put up 30 points. So like you're not special. You're not special. And let's go the opposite way. Let's say 10 of the 13 games are like 7 to 3. Like nothing happens. And none of the games go for more than 50 points. None of them. Well, there are 3 games out there that had a normal score, 24 to 21. Those are the high-scoring games now. Now, if the Vegas-Denver game was a 24-21 game and every other game was 6-3, I'm pretty sure that if you game stacked or team stacked or something, the Denver Raiders game, you'd win. Even though the game didn't even go over its total. So we're all talking in relative terms. So what ends up happening on a lot of weeks is we see like 13 games or something, 12 games, 11 games. And there'll be like 1 or 2 games that are like healthfully high total games. A 52, a 53, like 2 of them like that. And then there'll be like 2 or 3 that are like 39, 40. And then there'll be a bunch in the middle. So maybe you're like, okay, I'm not gonna play much out of the low total games, but these mid total games, 44s, 45s, what happens if that's the game? Well, it has to be the game, and the two high total games also have to underperform at the same time. At the same time, right? Let's say there's 3 high total games. So all 3 of them have to underperform. Let's say there's only one really high total game. Well, that has to underperform, right? Because it's all relative to our third lever. We talked about the levers, projection, correlation yesterday. Third lever of leverage. I'm using games as a proxy for players just to make it easier to understand. I'm not saying that all your lineups need to be 7-man game stacks or anything like that. They're not. They shouldn't be. I'm just putting in things in perspective of what you're targeting in building your NFL DFS lineups. So typically ownership goes towards the higher team total games. I mean, that's common. Now, sometimes because of a function of salary, it gets low. I mean, sometimes you had the Chiefs with, and the Eagles. Like AJ Brown is 8,800. It hurts his 9,000. He can't fit everyone in. And actually goes lower on Mahomes, Kelsey types of lineups. There's no cheap running backs or something, and it's hard to do. But for the most part, the higher total games are going to get more ownership. And in DFS, I mean, your goal is to beat teams, beat lineups relatively. It's one of, if not the most important concept in all of DFS, regardless of the sport. Your goal is not to score the most points. People hear that. They go, what? You're right. Your goal is not to score the most points. Your goal in NFL DFS is not to score 240 points or 300 points or that's not your goal. Your goal is to score more points than your opponents. If you're playing a head-to-head and your opponent only scored 83 points, your goal is to score 84. You don't get any more by scoring 220. Your goal is to score more points than your opponents. And how can you do that? Okay. How could you score more points than your opponents? You could do it by playing players and building lineups that your opponents don't have and they do well. I'm gonna choose this 2% owned wide receiver and he puts up 40 points. Ain't I smart? That's not the only way you could beat your opponents. You could score more than your opponents. It's by not playing the players that they have. So you may think in terms of, a 2% owned player goes for 40. I need to find that player. That's very difficult to do. That's a subject of a ton of variance. Good luck. Good luck trying to do that. Finding the 2% owned player that magically has their only 40-point game of their career today or this week or whenever. You know, an easier way to score more points than your opponents? By not playing the guys that they have that fail. Well, like 28% of the field is playing this $6,800 wide receiver. And then they only put up 9 points. When their mean is like 19. So 28% of the field underperformed the mean by 10 points. Let alone is 19 points going to necessarily win you a GPP. So from a ceiling perspective, it's like you have nearly a third of the field giving up like 20 points to you. When the higher owned players fail, the score you need to win a GPP goes down and down. So you don't have to find the 2% owned player that put up 40. You know when you have to find the 2% owned player that put up 40? When all the chalk hits. When all the chalk, when the 30% owned running back puts up 32, when the cheap $3,800 wide receiver everyone's playing to fit a lot of stuff in, they go for 27 points. Right? When the corner, everyone's playing Justin Fields, 47. There you go, 3 rushing touchdowns. It's one of those slates. Oh, the cheap running back at 5,400. He falls in the end zone 3 times. The winning score in the Millie Maker is going to be over 300. And you know how you get over 300? By having all those players that are chalk, because a lot of people have those players. And then you have the 1% owned guy that somehow put up 37 points out of nowhere. Some 4,700 Chris Olave at 1% owned or something. And all the chalk smashes also. Those are the two different ways of winning. I'm not poo-pooing this way, the way of, I'm going to just slam all the chalk and play 1% owned guy. Combinatorically, it's just very, very, very difficult. You need everything to go right for everyone, meaning everyone in the field. And then you being the outlier with one slot or a defense or something. So much easier to win when some of the chalk fails. Now, I didn't say all of the chalk failing because that would be the opposite. That would be the opposite side of the spectrum, right? Right? Some people, they go, okay, I'm going to play all the chalk. I'm going to just build the chalkiest damn lineup I can. I'm going to play the Tua stack and the Keenan Allen run back or Mike Williams because everyone's playing it. The two cheap running backs everyone's playing. The chalk defense, the highest variant position. And then I'm going to pick, the wide receiver, the 1% owned wide receiver. Like that, that's one end of the spectrum. But the other end of the spectrum is what's the chalk and Xing them all out and go, the $5,400 running back that really should be $7,800 based on his opportunity. I'm going to fade that guy at 36% owned. And I'm going to fade the Justin Jefferson is going to be 30% owned. I'm going to fade him. And then I'm going to fade the tight end, Mark Andrews is underpriced. I'm going to fade him, right? I'm going to fade all the Hurts and Mahomes are on. I'm going to fade them. I'm going to fade the $3,700 wide receiver. And everyone's, Richie James, 18% owned. I'm going to fade him, right? The chalk defense, right? Someone's out, blah, 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 yippee-doo-dah. It's a $2,200 defense that should have been $3,500. That's going to be like 48% owned. I'm going to fade that. I'm going to fade all of this. I'm just not going to play any of that in this line. And I'm going to build a lineup with just all players that are like 8% owned. Not like 1% owned, but like 8% owned. So relatively, from a relative standpoint, what do you need to happen? You need all the chalk to fail. You don't have to score that many points, though. Right? When all the chalk fails, and I don't mean fail by like they put up 3 points. I mean fail meaning they don't reach a ceiling where you need their score. Just to be clear. You play a $5,400 running back and they put up 11 points, that's failing. Can you still use 11 points at 5,400 in a line? Yeah, sure. It's not like I need to have that. You can find 11 points from a lot of people. Now, if that player puts up 28 points, yeah, you probably need him. So failure is just not putting up a score where it's going to be necessary. Right? The chalk defense has 7 points. Can you still win with the 7-point defense? Yeah, sure. Is that failing? I don't know about failing. Sure didn't put up 17 at defense. Now you can now it was probably good to have the 50% owned 17 points. So people go the other end of the spectrum. They go, I'm going to fade all the chalk. Well, the players are owned for a reason, right? I know NFL DFS is softer than other sports. But on the whole, the ownership efficiency is not awful. You don't see players that are 2% owned that should be 20. And just like you don't see players that are like 36% owned that should be 4% owned. You don't see that. So players are owned for a reason. They project well. Their means are good for their price. They're in good game environments, everything. So how does a lineup with all like 5 to 10% owned players, because you faded all the chalk, right? You didn't play all the 1% owned guys. You know, like, I'm not going to do that. Well, relatively, you need your players to do average. They don't even have to do that well. You don't have to have ultimate ceilings for all your players. You just need that to happen and all the chalk to fail. All of it. If there's 6 chalk players and one of them puts up a ceiling score, you're no good anymore. Right? So that's what you need to happen relatively. People always think these two spectrums, too much on these spectrums. I'm just going to jam in chalk and play a 1% owned guy. Probably not a good strategy, macro-wise. I'm going to fade all the chalk and play all 5 to 10% owned guys. Probably not a good strategy either. Probably if there's 6 guys that are 20+% owned, some of them are going to do well. Some of them are going to need the score. Are all 6 going to do well? Less likely. 5 out of the 6? A little bit more likely. 4 out of the 6? A little bit more likely. It's actually most likely 1 out of the 6 puts up a score that you're going to need. And a decent percentage of the time, 2 out of the 6 are going to put up a score you may need. And some of the time 3, and some of the time 4. Maybe not all 6. So from an ownership perspective, relatively, your goal, as it always is, regardless of sport, is to have the proper blend of the 3 levers: projection, correlation, and leverage. Because what happens if you eat all the chalk? Your projection is going to be pretty high, right? Your mean projection is going to look pretty good, very high. And even if you have some correlation in there, you're going to add some little, I'm going to stack the quarterback and the wide receiver and the running back on the other side of the game, and they all project well. The problem is that your leverage lever is like down at the bottom. It's like you're sharing you're sharing too many points. You're going to need to run perfect in order to win. You don't have leverage in your lineup at all. Then you have on the other end of the spectrum that I'm going to fade all the chalk. Your leverage lever is way up, but that projection is going to go way down. Dude, you fail. There's 6 chalk pieces that are, value plays, and you fade all of them. Your lineup could easily project like 15, 16 points. Like the best lineup you could make, projection-wise, fading all 6 will be like 2 touchdowns below in mean projection. You have to make that up by fading all of them. You fade half of them, then you're within a touchdown. Now you're fine. A little bit more. Your projection goes up. Your leverage lever goes up, and your projection lever sits there. You don't want it this way, and you don't want it that way. But you have to think in relative terms. Don't go into NFL DFS saying, I'm going to play this guy because I think he's going to do well. That's not how you play DFS. That's not how you win a DFS. It's not about scoring the most points. It's about scoring more points than your opponents. And one way you could counteract and gain more relative value on your opponents is with like direct leverage, which there is more of in NFL than in NBA, but not as much in MLB. MLB direct leverage is easy. This pitcher is going to be 60% owned. Well, you take bats against that pitcher. This stack is going to be 30% owned, so you take the pitcher against them, right? Because as one player does well, the other players do worse. They're negatively correlated to each other. Starting pitcher pitches 7 innings with 12 strikeouts. I guarantee you that the stack on the other side doesn't have many points. And if the stack on the other side put up 14 runs in the first 3 innings, it's kind of pretty hard for the starting pitcher to have anything. They have negative 21. NBA, you don't get much of that. The correlations are weak to begin with. Here in NFL, direct leverage, you have to think in terms, both in games and in players. Players is simpler. Everyone's playing Justin Jefferson, right? I have to know who's on every team now. Everyone's playing Justin Jefferson at 1,000,000% owned. Well, my cheap guy, my cheap 2% owned guy, 1% owned guy, in some lineups at 4,300, I'm going to play KJ Osborne or Jordan Addison. I'm going to play Jordan Addison at 5,100 at 4% owned, while Justin Jefferson's 28% owned. Well, why do you do that? Well, Justin Jefferson's 8,800, so he's going to need, 30 plus points. So if Addison is catching a touchdown, if Addison is getting 3 receptions here and the 22-yard pass down the field, Justin Jefferson isn't. That's quite possible they're both owned, right? But if one is 28% and one is 4%. Now, obviously, you could stack the team and play both receivers. That's positive correlation. But I'm talking about direct leverage. Or it could be the case where Justin Jefferson's high owned and Alexander Mattison is 4% owned. And you go, well, a lot of people are playing the Vikings passing stacks. And sub 5% on the running backs. So I'm going to build a lineup that gets leverage by just playing Madison. Now, if you want to bet on the Vikings and they put up 35 plus points, just play them all. They're all positively correlated to high, when they score 42 points, everyone does well. But in the mean area, the Vikings put up, 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals. It's quite possible Justin Jefferson has, he has a 100-yard game on 8 catches, but he doesn't have any touchdowns. They still scored 3 touchdowns. So who scored those 3 touchdowns? That would be direct leverage. Playing a significantly lower-owned player that benefits when one player doesn't do well or doesn't get the opportunities. But you could also think in terms of game environments. So, for instance, a lot of people in DFS. A lot of people in DFS try to predict game flow. They go, oh, this team's going to be up and they're going to be running the ball in the second half. Like that type of stuff. Thinking in relative terms, it's like the high total team. So let's say high ownership on a high total game. A lot of times is going to lead to more passing stacks from those teams. Well, in the case where this is not a high-scoring game, who benefits? Just in the same way that you go to the low total games. This is supposed to be predicted efficiently, more likely, more probable to be a low-scoring game. But what happens if it isn't? Who benefits? What is the field doing? Well, the field is overvaluing this game and undervaluing that game. Now, does that mean you go and you necessarily play, I'm going to play Carolina Atlantic stack? No. But maybe you'd be more inclined to play some one-offs from that game versus one-offs from the game that's already high total and already owned. Especially since players in the same game are correlated to each other. One of the things you'll hear often on shows this year, and I said it last year on the game theory show here on RotoGrinders, that what happens is that, okay, we get a Miami. Let's just go to the Miami Chargers game, right? And we see here it's like, oh, okay, there's Miami passing stacks, there's Allen Williams stacks, there's all this stuff. Eckler's owned, right? Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert or one of the Dolphins running backs. You see everyone is kind of owned. It's like, and then you go, well, I'm gonna play Jalen Waddle, is 8% owned, right? Which is not like low owned, but lower than other players in the game. And then someone will go, it's like, instead of playing Tua Hill with Mike Williams run back or something like that, I'm going to play Waddle instead. Or I'm going to play the other side of the game or on that, I'm going to play a Waddle one-off. I'm going to play a Raheem Mostert one-off. It's like, well, if there's enough ownership on the game and this lineup specifically benefits from that game failing, why would you want to take any piece of the game? So you're basically saying that the Dolphins-Chargers game doesn't go over, but Jalen Waddle still has a 30-plus point game. Well, if Jalen Waddle has a 30-plus point game, it's quite probable that that other people in this game had a good game. So you may think that, well, the lowest owned player and the lowest owned made player in this game is Jalen Waddle 8%, while everyone else is like 15 to 20%. I'm going to play him as a one-off. It's quite possible no one in this game is good as a one-off. Maybe a running back. Because if you're going to build a lineup as if the game is going to do well, then you probably benefit by having more pieces of it. This is a very similar concept in MLB. Although it doesn't happen, it's not as prevalent in MLB. But you can think of it like that's why we have the only in stacks button in MLB. What ends up happening is that the Braves are chalk. Because the Braves always do well. Just stack the Braves every day. You could retire on a private island this year at least. Ronald Acuna is like 6,700, and he's going to be like 36% owned. And the Braves are going to be like a 20% owned stack. And then you build then someone builds a lineup where they're the Mariners. They're playing a 5-man Mariners stack, and they have 3 one-offs, and they include Acuna as one of the one-offs. The point is that if Acuna has a great game, it's more likely the Braves have a good game. If Acuna's sitting there with 30 points, most likely Olsen's there, Albies is there, Ozuna, whoever on the Braves. If he's doing well, that means probably because of correlation in baseball, other Braves are doing well. And if the Braves are going to be high owned, why do you want to play Acuna one-off? The highest owned percentage of the entire slate. Very similar to our example before with Justin Jefferson. The Vikings stack is chalk. And Justin Jefferson is the most expensive player in that stack. And you're like, oh, well, I'm going to play him as a one-off. So basically, what are you saying? What is the story that you're telling in your lineup? Justin Jefferson breaks the slate, but somehow none of the other Vikings player or any player from the other side of the game does anything. That's less likely to happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's less likely. Justin Jefferson has 4 touchdowns, 180 yards and 4 touchdowns. Well, there's a quarterback that has 4 touchdowns that he threw, and he probably threw over 350 yards. So you're probably going to need the quarterback. If he had the opportunity to catch, 4 long touchdowns, someone on Tampa Bay probably is doing well because the game is going back and forth. So taking high-owned, expensive one-offs from teams that are already going to be stacked to the gills from a leverage perspective doesn't make that much sense. You're not number one, you're playing an owned player, so you're sharing a lot of points with a lot of portion of the field. But other players in your opponent's lineups are benefiting from that, and you're not. That's the game of leverage. I mean, this is how you apply leverage in any sport. Think in terms of what players are owned and also what players are negatively and positively correlated to those players. What types of constructions are correlated to those players? Well, I'm going to play the highest. I'm going to play an $8,400 running back, an $8,000 wide receiver. And what do those lineups look like? Do those lineups have an expensive tight end? Do those lineups have what do they look like? If you see that, the chalky game, people are going to stack the chalky game. They're going to need to find a $3,500 wide receiver and a $2,900 tight end. That's what the construction is going to look like. What's the chalky construction? How could you leverage off of that? Everyone's going to play everyone, quote unquote. Everyone's going to play the $8,200 running back and the $5,200 running back. Play for the 8K wide receiver, the 5K wide receiver, and this cheap $3,200 guy. Take a look at that and go, okay, how do I get a projection that is similar? You're not going to get as high. that doesn't rely on this construction. That's a way of getting leverage. You can get it combinatorically. Doesn't mean you fade everyone. Let me make it clear. Doesn't mean you take who's over 20% on an X amount. You're going to be playing chalk in lineups in NFL. You're going to. You're just not going to be playing them all together. And there are going to be some weeks where every player over 25% owned crushes. They're going to be weeks like that. There's also going to be weeks that every player over 25% is awful. And people are going to be on Twitter going, you got the two different types of things. When all the chalk smashes, you go on Twitter and people are complaining about not cashing with 240 point scores. I put up the most amount of points that I ever have, and I only got 1.5x or something. Then on the other end of the spectrum, when all the chalk fails, it's like, never again. I'm never eating the chalk, right? And it's, all the people were wrong. Right? Jamar Chase had a 19-point projection, and he only put up 15 points. Fail. Well, these are the range of outcomes in NFL, and especially in small sample sizes. You should want to take advantage of that. That's what we'll be talking about tomorrow. Taking advantage of variance. Just macro strategies in NFL DFS. That's what we're covering this week. Macro strategy. Micro strategy, you can do the same thing. You could not know nothing, jack squat about football, and do well in NFL DFS. The same way you do it in baseball and basketball or anything like that. We got projections. You get projections and ownership and build lineups. You absolutely can. 100%. Some people want to get the extra edge. So you know what you're looking at when you're looking at lineups. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Taking advantage of variance, especially in NFL. NFL is the probably MMA to some extent, golf to another extent, but NFL. Taking advantage of variance in NFL is, to me, one of the best macro strategies. Only because it is a small sample size sport. PGA kind of is. MMA definitely is. Taking advantage of variance, meaning that the field does not recognize how variant the player's distribution based on opportunities actually is. It's probably the most advantageous early in the season. It's the most profitable way to play. Because you don't know. People think they know, they don't. And any data that you analyze is on very small. We're talking about 17, 18 weeks of football. We don't get 162 games like in baseball. You don't get 82 games in basketball. You're going to get into week 6, and you're going to have 5 weeks worth of data. And then you can see half the teams have personnel changes. This guy's out. That guy's injured. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? This defender's out. This thing is the quarterback has a blister. You have no idea. And people overvalue stuff. They either do one of two things. They either overvalue their gut. Right? Well, I saw this, right? This should happen. Or they simply overvalue even the data. They go, well, his mean projection's 18, so I got to play him. It's like, well, his mean projection's 18 if he has a 22% target share. If the team gets a lead. All those ifs. Yes, that is the mean. Maybe this range of outcomes is not like this, and maybe it's way wider than you think. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Hit that thummy thumb. Hit the thummy thumbs. Hit the thummy thumbs. Send in your questions. You send in questions, I have answers. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. I will answer them this week and next week. And once we head into the first week NFL season, we'll be talking about slates and we'll be back to normal, right? Not just NFL primer stuff. A lot of the stuff I talk about on this show, all these concepts, are in the Theory Daily Fantasy Sports. How to think like a professional DFS player, as well as Theory DFS for advanced players, how to apply profitable DFS strategies, which includes custom Excel tools. You can pick them up. Theoryofdfs.com. You got a grand total of 21 plus hours of audio that you could just listen through the whole thing, play, and then come back to it 2 or 3 months, and then listen to the whole thing again. You'll pick up everything. You'll never need the show again. You'll never need to talk to me ever again, which may be a good thing. So pick that up, theoryofdfs.com. Send in your questions. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. We'll do more NFL DFS primer stuff tomorrow because I'm here answering your questions like I always do. Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.